Welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, YouTubers, and everyday users, and podcasters. Each one plays a vital role in our community, and the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host Rocco, and with me today, I am so excited. Our special guest is my friend, Brent Gervais.
Hello, Rocco. How are you doing?
I have been waiting for this episode, dude, since we talked about it. It's absolutely awesome. What is going on, brother?
Oh, not much. I just got home from some traveling, and so I've been home for not quite 48 hours. So it's good to be relaxing, moving into that relaxing mode. So it's good.
Yep. Hey, there's nothing like relaxing. And we're gonna relax because I have some coffee here, and we're gonna talk about a lot of stuff.
I hope so. I hope so. That's the intention, right?
That's right. So most people will know you for being you're here. I should say not know you. They'll know your voice.
Yeah, right.
For being on Jupiter Broadcasting shows like Linux Unplugged, being in the Mumble Room, and of course the Extra Show, where all of the extra things that Jupiter Broadcasting does gets funneled into, and your podcast, your show, is in that Extra Show, and we're gonna deep dive into that show as well in a few minutes. But if somebody asked you, Brent, who is Brent Gervais personally, what would you say to them?
Well, I often say that sometimes it's easiest to ask questions and hardest to answer them, because I feel like we're all multifaceted people. So if I was to take it maybe on the simplest level, I would say I'm a person walking through the world trying to chase all the things that are really curious and interesting to me. And that includes Linux and includes open source stuff. It also includes photography. But there's a whole bunch more in there as well. So,
people.
Let's dive in,
Yep.
Maybe. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think connecting with people is probably a thread that connects all of those, but, that would be the Coles Notes version.
All right. So you are a photographer by day. And I believe if I'm correct, you are self-employed in that.
That is a proper assumption. Yep. That is totally spot on.
So how long have you been into photography,
Mm-hmm.
and what got you interested in it from the very beginning?
Yeah. So photography I've been self-employed. I always say forever, but that's not quite true. Basically since I'm 16, it's the first kind of real job I had other than pumping gas at a gas station. And I've been doing it ever since. I've been lucky enough to have fallen on one of my many passions pretty early, and have had some pretty amazing mentors throughout who've taught me how to make a living and how to make a lifestyle out of photography that really works for me. So yeah, I've been doing photography forever and supplementing that with a whole bunch of other really exciting stuff, such as, talking into microphones and doing a little bit of farming stuff and local food stuff. And I'm sure we'll dive into some of that. But yeah, it's been photography as a base splashed with a whole bunch of great stuff.
Very nice. So yeah, like you said, we're going to get into your photography and everything else.
Yeah.
And before we get too deep into Linux, do you have any other hobbies outside of Linux and photography?
That might take us an hour to talk about.
Let's do it, dude. We got time.
Yeah. So I would say almost everything I do started as a hobby. So photography itself started as a hobby. I know you just asked me how I got into it and I didn't answer that. But it was one of those happy accidents that happened. I live in Canada, and as almost every Canadian kid does, I played hockey since I was 4.
Yep.
And ended up, one of the last games of one of the seasons when I was a teenager, ended up breaking my collarbone, which is kind of a drag because then the summer's coming up and you can't really do anything. And it was a pretty severe break, so it lasted a long time for healing and that kind of stuff. So, but my father was like, well, I know you like doing outdoor stuff, but you're kind of held up. So I got this cheap sort of camera for work that I don't really use very often. I'm just going to hand it to you, see if you can keep yourself busy. And busy I kept myself. It just turned into a crazy hobby that I wouldn't let go, and just sort of grew and grew and grew from there, and took over every single minute of my free time, which is kind of a beautiful thing. And so that started as a hobby and turned into a career, really. Linux definitely started as a hobby and still is. And I mean that in the best kind of way, that I still enjoy tinkering with it and learning new things and playing. And I don't think that's ever going to change. So those two maybe are pretty obvious. I also do, so many things. So I have an interest in local food and farming. So I have a whole bunch of friends around here and a little bit all over the province who are farmers, ranging from young people who have just gotten into it for the last few years to people who've been doing it for a really long time and still love it. And so I try to tour around as much as I can and go help people. Most farmers, are having a pretty hard time. So
yeah,
if I can show up for a day or a week or 2 weeks and make a difference for them, that feels really meaningful. And also I get to learn a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm lucky enough that the kind of work that I do allows me to be a bit everywhere. I don't have to be home to be productive. I can do photography in many different places. Most of my work is sort of laptop based, and that means I can work out of a off-grid cabin if I want to. So that would be another big interest. It's on the top of my mind because I sort of did a bunch of that stuff this week. Yeah, if something else comes up, I'll definitely mention it for sure. But super curious being for sure.
Now, do you get any inspiration from that as far as in your photography from the farming aspect of it?
Oh, I like that question. Well, I think I'm really interested in the intersection of different people's interests and how that makes them a unique person. So I think because I have a variety of interests, of course, they all sort of inform each other, right? Maybe not obviously, but there's something about being on a farm out in the open in the fresh air and having your hands in the dirt that just builds this deep connection to the food you're growing and the people you're feeding and your time in those moments. It's kind of meditative because of the connections to it. So I always try to bring that same feeling to everything I'm doing. So if I'm here podcasting with you, I'm 100% here.
Right.
And I've got my hands in the dirt, so to speak. So I think, it all sort of informs each other. All of the interests inform each other. And maybe it's actually really useful to sort of think about how that is. So yeah, I really love that question.
Well, let's get into the computer area of your life. Let's go back to the very beginning and talk about what is the first computer you used.
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask this question, so I thought, okay, I gotta remember this stuff. So I guess something I'm going to put to you that you can think about while I'm buying time is, define computer. Because I think a lot of us have played, entertainment systems and stuff like that in our early days, right?
Yep.
But I think, the traditional, I think what you're actually leaning to is like, tell me the sort of keyboard monitor sort of computer that you actually got some stuff done on.
Well, it's okay. You can mention all of the other types.
Well, yeah, I would also admit that I'm actually more excited about about the actual real desktops and stuff. And so the first computer I ended up using was a Commodore 64. and I'm not really that old. I'm in my 30s, and but it was a computer my father had, and he taught us from an extremely young age how to use that thing. Um, from all the command line stuff to keeping track of our sort of allowance in a spreadsheet on that thing when we were super
Really?
young. Oh yeah, because I think he saw the real benefit of what that technology could do for us. And he's a pretty technical guy as well. And so I think because it really worked for him, he saw that it was just a catalyst to so many other benefits, we had a bunch of other games and stuff on there. Like there was a really classic game. So if anybody's played this game, please reach out to me and say hi. There was a game that really stuck in my mind on that Commodore called Texter. And you're basically this robot and you fly around doing levels and stuff. But I haven't run into anyone who knows that game. So just putting that out there. And so, yeah, there's some pretty fond memories of that computer. There's the 5.5-inch floppies and the sounds that they make, and needing 5 of them to load up King Quest or something on that machine, right? So, so some really fond memories of that time for sure. I don't remember breaking anything, but I'm sure I just decided to forget about that part.
Yes,
but
probably.
Even the sound of that dot matrix printer just going back and forth, like there's some nostalgia there. So yeah, fond memories of that thing.
So was that like a family computer, or was that yours specifically?
No, that was definitely a family computer. And that's kind of how it started for us. I've got 2 brothers, and both my parents have used computers for a long time. So it's kind of a shared experience. I mean, back then computers were kind of expensive. So,
Yep.
So it wasn't really viable for a household to have multiple computers. Of course, that changed a few years later. I say a few, probably 10 years later. So I did end up, our family computer got upgraded, thank God, to, I don't know really exactly what it was, but it was a Pentium of some sort. And I specifically remember toying on that computer with my older brother and dropping. He was doing something crazy. He's like, okay, can you just hold this for a moment? I'm just trying to do something. And it was a hard drive, and I dropped it from like a few millimeters away and toasted the thing.
Oh,
so that was, a hard lesson, literally. But yeah, we ended up tinkering a lot with that thing, and to my parents' chagrin, of course. And, but that launched me into just, wanting my own computer. So I ended up, again, with my brother's help, just getting something in my own room and being able to tinker on stuff on there. So, and it's just progressed from there.
Nice. So you get your own computer. When is the first time you hear about Linux?
Yeah, it's my brother's fault.
It's always
I have an older
his fault.
brother, which he's about 4 years older, and he and I are so alike. And I have a twin brother as well, which of course he and I are alike, but we all get along pretty well. But my older brother, Chris, he's 4 years older, and he just pushed so many things on us that he knew we would love. And so computers was definitely one of them, but he was the one who introduced me to Linux. And back then, he introduced me to Mandrake and Mandriva. And it was always just like a dabbling. It was like, hey, this seems interesting. Why don't we see what this is all about? But it never really made it onto the standard system.
Right.
More of an exploration than a commitment, perhaps. But as I learned from you, that's often what happens with all of us, right? Is like you get a few tastes of it and it doesn't quite work, and you come back to it and it works a little bit more.
Well, what about your memories of them first experiences with Mandrake? What were the good things? What were the bad things?
Well, I remember simply being excited by something different. And I think that is probably a good theme for my entire life. I'm often attracted by the novel or the eccentric. So having something different that I didn't quite understand was like a treasure trove of possibilities just for learning things. And I didn't quite know what learning was going to mean. I'm still learning
Yep.
Linux, right? And I don't think that's
Still.
ever going to end, right? So, but I do remember, I don't quite remember the interface on some of the very most earliest versions of Linux that we toyed with, but I do remember early versions of KDE. And I remember them being a bit, if I would describe them as like a bit cartoonish or candy feeling. I'm not good with version numbers and stuff, but some of those earlier versions felt really kind of gentle and fun in some
Yes.
ways that a Windows interface certainly didn't. But I remember being excited by that while also not knowing how to do anything. So definitely installed it a few places and screwed things up, and spent many hours trying to fix things again. But that was the beginning, really, and it was always sort of at the back of my mind as like, oh yeah, I know it's there, and it'll come back when it needs to.
Well, how does Windows all fit in there? Were you dual booting Windows or?
Well, Windows was the system that was everywhere. It's fairly ubiquitous. So when I was growing up, it was the computers that we had at our school. It was also the computer, I think we had, I guess it was probably 95 on our sort of shared household computer. And so it was just kind of the default, right? So when I got my own machine, it was kind of the same thing. I think my brother helped me do a dual boot on 2 separate disks, which was likely a very good direction to go, because if I messed up one disk, I didn't necessarily mess up the whole thing.
Yep.
And he taught me, how to plug in hard drives and unplug hard drives and stuff like that. So I was able to not toast everything. And if I did, he was always there to help me out.
I wish I knew that earlier on.
Oh man, having a mentor, he was really my mentor in that way. And having a mentor to tell you exactly all of the things not to do is really helpful.
Now you have your own, computer. Do you now? You have your own computer. You're trying Linux out. Do you ever go to the family computer and say, "Hey, I can put Linux on that"?
Well, no, because we at that point it was pretty exciting. All of us, I say us, me and my brothers, we each had our own system in our own rooms, and the sort of idea there was to allow us to do some local gaming.
Right.
So we literally had network cables running up and down the hallway of our family home, connecting all of these computers to my parents' chagrin. So, so that was pretty great. But it also meant that I had my own tinker box, right? I didn't have to screw up the sort of stable family machine that my parents were relying on for arguably more important things than we were doing.
Right.
So I think in a way that was great, because if my machine went down, I guess I still apply that principle now, but if my sort of tinkering machine went down, there was always the production machine I can get my schoolwork done on or whatever.
Well, is there any room in there for Mac in your history?
Oh yeah, lots. So I started going to university. I went to university, I took computer science. And so obviously Linux played a part in that, thankfully. But I discovered photography at about the same time. And a year in, photography was taking up all of my time and all of my interest. And I'd stay up till 3, 4 in the morning doing photography stuff. So I decided to change and switch and go to college for photography. And it was a Mac only sort of situation. They said, no, you can't have Windows. You got to buy this specific Mac. You got to have this specific software, Adobe, of course. Right. And there are no options. And so I tried to fight that, because I had been using Photoshop 7 for a long time on Windows machines. And they wouldn't have it. So I caved, bought a MacBook Pro, it was 15-inch, one of the old classics that were really great. And I guess that must have been, 2010 era. So then I was on Mac for like literally 5 years straight. Never used Windows after that, because I actually really appreciated some of the methodologies with Mac and some of the philosophy, and especially the command line. And little did I know it would lean very kindly into some Linux stuff from there. But yeah, I used Macs extensively for myself, and also when I was assisting other photographers and doing some work in their studios and stuff. Photography's pretty Mac centric.
Yep.
So lots and lots of experience on Macs.
So do you still use Windows at all?
I don't have a single copy of Windows anywhere. Like even if I wanted to, I can't. nor Mac stuff anywhere. I'm 100% Linux, and that was a huge feat for me and a big goal. And I've made it work, and it feels like a real treat that we're at a point where we can do that.
That is amazing that you can be a professional photographer and make that switch to Linux. We got to talk about that then. We have to go into that.
Well, it started, I think it started in about 2011 when I realized, all right, I've done the Windows sort of Photoshop thing. I've done the Mac Photoshop Adobe suite. Lightroom was out at that point, and I was quite proficient with it. But I sort of decided, okay, if I'm going to run my own business for who knows how long, probably forever, and I know the style of computing that I really believe in. So philosophy, some of the philosophy around technology started coming in at that point. It just felt like open source tools, which I was using lots of on Mac, felt like the right direction to go in. And so I thought, okay, well, the next step is the operating system and my photography tools. And that's no small thing, right? Switching operating systems, Linux was pretty good back then. But switching photography tools, anybody who dabbles in photography and is tied to Lightroom, we've heard this from a lot of people, you get sort of tied to your workflow. And because it's such a creative space, it becomes quite a challenge actually to want to move from there, or to be forced to move from there, either by choice or not. So I made the conscious decision to force myself to explore the other options. And so Darktable was doing some pretty cool stuff back then. It wasn't at all what it is now. It really has sort of found its place, and it's extremely good piece of software now. It was really good back then, but has come a long way. And but I feel lucky that I came to it at a time when it was capable of doing most of what I needed it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were certainly some sacrifices, but I felt like those sacrifices were worthwhile for the goals that I had. And I haven't turned back, seriously. I now, anytime, one of my photographer friends is like, oh yeah, just help me with this thing. And I jump on their computer with Lightroom, and I'm like, oh yeah, Lightroom. I miss Darktable. And that's part familiarity, but it's also just so powerful. And it's this environment that I use on a daily basis that I love, right? So it's been a wild, amazing journey to be 100% dedicated to Linux, and I'm not turning back anytime soon.
Well, there are quite a few photographers in the Biddle community, and two in particular, Wendy Hill and Shane Milton, both are Linux only photographers for their workflow and their software. And I think it's just amazing because you hear people say, oh, I can't come to Linux because of this program.
Yeah.
And you're able to do it. They're able to do it. And it really only takes the determination to want to do it.
There's some growing pain to changing tool sets anytime, whether open source or not. But if you're willing to sort of explore that area, I think you could push yourself to do a lot of things you don't think you're capable of. So, I'll challenge some people to give that a try. And so I feel like photography's come a long way in Linux, and a lot of different industries have. You and I know Jill Bryant Reiniker quite well, and she's been doing some pretty amazing things on Linux in animation stuff for a long time.
Yep.
So that space has been pretty Linux dedicated for a long time, but it feels like all of the industries are sort of moving a little bit towards that as the open source tools or the tools on Linux get better and better. So, we're seeing audio stuff move in that direction. It's a slow pace, but it's getting there. So, hopefully we can see a lot more industries moving that way.
When I talked to her after the episode, I had a nice conversation with her about video editors. And there are some very good open source video editors out there. But we were talking about other programs, and DaVinci Resolve came up.
Yeah.
And I have switched over my workflow to DaVinci Resolve, and it is an amazing program, and it works on Linux.
Yeah.
And that is like one of the most important things. So,
yeah, it's interesting when there's kind of two aspects there, right? There's bringing software to Linux, period, whether it's open source or not. So that's a big game changer. But then to see the open source tools also move into directions that are sort of professional ready, that's also very, very exciting. So I support both of those because I feel like the more Linux users we can get, the better for a great many reasons. But yeah, it's good to see tools like that be available for sure.
Yep. I like the variety of those tools coming to Linux. I like the not so much competition, but that, we can further this by adding this feature. And that I think competition is the right word, but that idea of forwarding the space that you're in, whether that's video editors or audio editors or whatever, is important for the whole market to grow. So,
yeah, there's something about like many players pushing pressure on the underlying systems to become better to allow,
yes,
video editing or audio editing to be a professional option on Linux. So I think, the more players we can have, the more users we can have, the better.
You said that way more professional than I did.
Just because I had time to take your words and make them simpler.
So, on your personal machines.
Yeah.
Are you...
You say machines like you assume that I have more than one.
I don't know. Do you have more than one?
It's a safe assumption. Yes.
Okay. Usually people do just for testing purposes. But anyway, on your machines, are you that stable OS kind of guy? Or do you consider yourself that guy that tries all the distros out?
Right. So I would actually say that I probably, to my own chagrin, will place myself in the stable category. I definitely have an interest in a lot of all of it, but I don't find myself regularly testing very much of it. And on my primary machine, which you and I are talking on right now, it's a ThinkPad X220, actually. I travel quite a lot with it, so I know for me this is my toolbox, right? And I need it to be super stable, but I kind of laugh a little bit because I say that, and I'm running sort of an antiquated version of Antergos, which is people would say an Arch-based distribution is not necessarily the most stable option.
That is quite
right?
Interesting.
So I'm clearly somewhere in between. And I do that because it has been in the past important for me to get some of the tools a little bit sooner than other distributions get them. If you're on an LTS, sometimes getting a new version of Darktable, for instance, is not possible for years. So a rolling distribution has been a really nice way to keep that pace. And I have actually really appreciated the necessity to dig in sometimes with Arch to solve some problems because I've just learned so much more about the machine I'm using, right? Or the software I'm using, I should say. So it's been a really nice balance for me because it offers me the stability in the sense that I'm not always changing my environment, but also some newness of features and software and that kind of thing. So it's a nice balance for me.
Well, I can definitely relate to the stable portion of wanting one distro, one operating system on your machine that you do your work on. I run Pop! OS on this machine, but I also have a test machine that I'm able to test out other distros, but that doesn't relate to anything with affecting this machine, which is exactly where I want it.
That's a very good idea. That's a very, very good idea. And so I've done a little bit of testing and stuff in like VMs and those kind of things, but I guess I've just been so happy with this environment that I haven't felt the need to dive other places. That might be changing because I'm upgrading very soon. Thanks to Alex on Self-Hosted, we did a bunch of upgrades to an X250 that I got that are going to work just swell for me. But I've been super happy with the X220 for a very long time. It's a beautiful machine, so no reason to leave it.
So, are you going to stick with Antergos on the new?
Well, as you may have heard, Antergos has recently dissolved.
Right, but you're still using it.
Yeah, so it's switched to sort of a pure Arch distro at this point. They were kind enough to sort of do some transitioning, so now it's just sort of running off the Arch repositories, and I haven't seen a hiccup at all in that process. So glad for that. And I know there's a project that's kind of taken that up. I forget the name of it now. I think
Endeavor OS.
Endeavor, yeah. And so I haven't quite explored Endeavor. I'm very hesitant to dive into projects that are relatively new for the same reasons of stability and all that stuff. If I'm going to change environments, I'm likely going to stick to it for a while, only because most of the time when I sit down to my laptop, I need, not that I want to, but I need to get things done. So I like, same as you, playing when I want to, when I choose to, on a machine that isn't going to screw things up. So,
yep. Now, what desktop environment do you run?
So, I'm a huge, massive fan of KDE Plasma. I was using XFCE prior, and the reason I chose XFCE was for a lot of the same philosophies as we were just talking about, some stability, simplicity, and it wouldn't just change on me, which is really nice. But, Chris from Jupiter Broadcasting a long time ago suggested, he did the whole KDE challenge. I think that was like a year and a half, 2 years ago or something like that.
Yep.
Might have even been more than that. And I was late to the game, and I thought, okay, I haven't checked out KDE in a very long time. I'm gonna dive in, and to my surprise and pleasure, it's been phenomenal. I really, really, really have liked it. It's made me a much more productive human being on my laptop. So I have pretty much zero complaints. So I think I'm here to stay. While I certainly value some of the other ones, it would take me a pretty catastrophic failure to move off of it. So it just sort of works for me in many beautiful ways.
KDE is very nice. It has so many innovative features to it, and it's a beautiful desktop. I started my channel, the YouTube channel, on making KDE customization videos.
Of course.
So I have a special place in my heart for KDE. So yeah, that's pretty awesome.
But the same is true, right? Like, so many of the others are also doing wonderful things, and so I got nothing against those. I wouldn't say I've had a bad experience on a desktop environment in a very long time. So I think that's a huge, that's a real big success for all of us. So kudos to everybody doing that work.
That's a good statement. And I want to go back to one thing you mentioned about the Antergos guys, where you said that Antergos stopped. Basically, they shut down, but they didn't just walk away. And I think that's important to note, that they made it so that every Antergos user could just basically get a vanilla Arch system then, rather than just saying we're done with this and walking away and leaving people in the lurch. So
yeah, and that really shows a dedication to the user base. And I want to support projects, or be a part of projects that support the user base first, instead of just being, a project for themselves and some other people tend to use this, but they're secondary, right? I feel like if we're going to be kind stewards to the users, that's super important. So I have appreciated that for sure.
Well, if I could make a recommendation, you had mentioned Endeavor, and I would, if I was you, check out their community and their discourse forums. They are a great community to be around.
I'm sure, yeah.
Brian, the lead guy in Endeavor, is an awesome guy that loves the community. So I would check out the community and then check out the distro, because I think the community is just as good as the distro.
Oh, great. That's so good to hear. I got this massive smile on, obviously. And because I feel like that's what's really important. So I'm happy to check that out. That sounds great.
All right. So let's deep dive into your photography here.
All right.
So you said you've been in photography for a very long time. But what was the decision process for you to make it your business, to be self-employed as a photographer?
I don't think it was that strategic. And I say that because I think it was a little bit more emotional, maybe. I like I mentioned, I was just doing photography at all hours of the day, and I couldn't help myself. And I was totally, my mentor Rob says that I had the bug, and it just wouldn't let go. So that I took as a sign that probably it was worth investigating more. I had a taste of what a business in photography might look like and a lifestyle in photography might look like. Because both of my mentors at the time, they each were running their own businesses and taking me under their wing and taking me on all sorts of photo shoots and showing me sort of what it was like. So I was lucky enough that I didn't jump into the unknown. I had some people to model, and I also had a lot of experience for a relatively young person. I was 16 at the time and had been doing photography like crazy, like photographing lots and lots and lots of weddings and portrait sessions. And we did some commercial work together. And so I was on photo shoots all the time at a relatively young age. And that allowed me to kind of really get a taste for what that might be extrapolated to, if I was to do it for 10 years, for instance. And they were also leaders in their field. They were hosting conferences, teaching some of the stuff that they were doing. So I was in very good hands, and I feel really blessed to have had that opportunity. So it just became pretty clear that there was nothing else that I would be willing to do, at least not with the same level of passion. So they basically said, okay, well, now that you want to do this, you should leave town. And I thought, what do you mean? You guys have been mentoring me for like 2 years. I don't get it. They're like, you know what? We're in this town. I live in a relatively small city in Northern Ontario. And they said, like, you're super young. Like, get out of here. Go to a bigger place, see some bigger stuff. And it'll make you a much better photographer. It'll make you a much better business person. It'll make you a much better person just to have had those experiences. So I said, all right, well, I've trusted you guys up to now, so I'll continue that. So moved to a bigger city, moved to Ottawa, actually. And luckily they had such a far reaching network that I could instantly get connected with a bunch of people there. And so just continued that journey of exploring the business of photography. I was doing a bunch of shoots on my own, running my own business at that time as well. And so it just sort of naturally evolved in a place that, out of sort of a passion, which is a heated word these days, but just a natural, deep interest in the field. And I think doing something creative was also really refreshing to me. So that's sort of how it went there.
So you mentioned the business part of it, and it's been brought up a couple times now. Being in your own business is, there's some struggles to it, but it also can be very rewarding because, you don't just wear some of the hats. You wear all of the hats in the
You are
business.
the hat.
But is there some things that you picked up, you've learned over the years of being self-employed, good things, maybe things to avoid?
It's a dangerous landscape to suggest that each business is the same, of course, but there's been I would say a real gift for me in the lifestyle of being self-employed and being my own, I guess, entrepreneur. And one of the ones that always comes up first is my ability to deal with adversity. And I sometimes just refer to that as just having a flexible lifestyle. I'm able to sort of change quickly what I'm doing or make decisions about the kind of work I want to be doing and not have any excuses for it. So I can decide, okay, well, this client who came to me does things I don't believe in. So I don't feel forced to collaborate with those people. Or there's a client that comes to me who doesn't have much money or much budget or whatever, and yet I really believe in them and I can wholeheartedly do that work without needing to apologize to anyone. So that for me has been really important. And I've realized with a few opportunities to do other work that's actually one of the things I value the most about the sort of lifestyle and business lifestyle that I've been in for the last, decade plus, is that I get to run my own show.
Right.
And I don't think I could have it any other way, in a sense. I'm very happy to collaborate with lots of people, and that has always been at the core of what I'm doing. But there's something, the trade-offs that I've had to make to run my own business, because there are several, have been totally worth the flexibility in many ways.
Yeah, that seems like an awesome place to be not subject to specific circumstances or specific clients or specific things. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's allowed me to sort of move cities when I want to, take breaks to live on a winery in a random place when I want to go traveling on the East Coast for 2 weeks to go see Alex and Drew when I want to. And, to just basically live a very rich lifestyle. And I don't mean rich monetarily. I mean rich in experience and in adventure and in exploration, really. So I hope that doesn't have to ever change.
Well, what is your photography style? Like you mentioned that you do like weddings and whatnot, but are you into like what is your style? I don't want to put any words in your mouth. So what is your photography style?
Well, I mentioned I did weddings. I wouldn't say I do weddings anymore.
Okay.
I definitely started out photographing weddings because that's what my mentors are doing. And that was really valuable in many ways. They were doing sort of mid to high end weddings, and I got connected with some people in Ottawa too, who were basically the best wedding photographers I have ever seen. So I was really lucky to work under them, or with them. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Right.
But weddings taught me to really think on my feet. If you could imagine, on a wedding as a photographer, you're sort of running the show in a sense, because you're making sure everybody's on time and you're always with the right people. But as a photographer, you also have to, you got to capture photos of things that are happening around you. So doing weddings taught me how to use my camera without thinking about it, which was like one of the best skills I could possibly gain, because it allowed the tool to just disappear out of my hands and allowed me to just create what I needed to create without even consciously thinking about it. But it also forced me to foresee things that were about to happen. Because if you noticed something and you said, "Oh, I want to get a photo of that," it was already too late. Because that moment is in front of you, but your camera isn't up to your face or whatever, right? So it taught me to anticipate life in, in small ways with wedding photography. But those two skills, and I gained a bunch more, but those two are the main ones that has carried throughout my photography, which has changed and evolved. But also in a bunch of life ways. So I used to do wedding stuff, and I used to do portrait stuff because they kind of go hand in hand, but that has evolved. And so these days, and for maybe the last, I don't know, almost 10 years now, I've been doing primarily commercial photography and corporate photography and what I would call like editorial stuff. So editorial is like photos for magazines. Generally, in all of those, the connecting piece is people, as you probably guessed. But portraits and telling people stories is really what jazzes me. So, if it's for a magazine, it's trying to tell a story. So trying to tell someone's story in their environment, or trying to tell the story of some business or something like that. And for the corporate and commercial stuff, it's always trying to highlight a product that's doing something really, really great, but with the people included in there. And that sort of area has brought me experiences that are so cool. That's another thing I love about photography is it allows me to jump into someone else's life for a day or a week and experience what life is like in their shoes for a little while. So I'm constantly getting new novel experiences from all of that, which is really great.
Well, you mentioned telling somebody's story, and
Yeah.
you're not the one writing the articles in these
No.
magazines. So you have to tell that story in your photographs, and that has to be something that's learned over time.
Yeah, I suppose it is a little bit of a skill to translate words into visuals, especially, I tend to be a sort of real life photographer. And what I mean by that is hardly any of my work is ever done in studio. I always prefer to go to an environment, to go to where people actually do the work they're doing, and to sort of capture the magic that happens on site. So, yeah, often the words and the images have to sort of tell the same story because it's easy for them not to, right? I've been lucky enough that the work I've done has been really collaborative. So there's always been a lot of back and forth basically to generating the words and the images at the same time. Or maybe I can go, for instance, which I did for Maclean's magazine, but I can go like to a northern, small little lake sort of cabin spot. I guess it was a summer camp, and go and take a whole bunch of photographs to help the writer understand what happens there, because not always can the writers and the photographers be in the same place at the same time. So, there's been examples of me just sort of exposing what happens somewhere and then the writing coming later. But oftentimes it's also for like marketing campaigns and stuff like that, where they already have an idea of sort of the story they want to tell. And it's about me constructing images that help tell that story, which is always a bit of a challenge, as you might imagine, because, I'm dealing with people, and people are not really like objects. If you're a shoe photographer, you have a shoe and you just get to place it however you want, and it doesn't really move, right? And if you don't like the way it's tied, just tie it again. But with people, there's this way that you can move people, but not physically. You gotta bring them on side, and you have to convince them that what you're doing is with the most respect that you can, and with their best interest in mind. And only then can you generate an image that actually everybody's going to be happy with, and that is authentic.
Well, you mentioned the challenges. So what would be the hardest thing about photography and getting that right shot,
Well, I would argue the challenge is defining what the right shot is.
This is true.
If I'm being hired by a client, that's often the biggest question is like, okay, well, what story are we trying to tell? And that's not always obvious. It's like, oh, well, we have this product. It's like, okay, well, how do we want to show it? What context does it get used in? Who are the people who are using it? How do they use it? Why do they use, like, all of these questions come in, right? So yeah, I feel like the what story are you trying to tell is usually the biggest defining factor for where photography tends to, which avenue you go down to. Cause there's like a swath of different ways I can capture a scene, for instance. But if we're conscious, as me and the creative team that I'm working with, if we're conscious about the message we want to tell, then it gives me a direction on who I'm going to place where, or what background I'm going to include or not include, or maybe it's a series of photographs or just one photograph, or maybe it's concentrated on just the person, or maybe the person's just in the background. It's the product that's in the front, right? So yeah, those big questions are surprisingly important, because otherwise I'm just creating images that I think are fun and maybe they're not that useful.
Well, maybe that can answer my next question,
Right.
which is like finding that story that you want to tell, because, I'm not a photographer. I'm just a guy with a cell phone camera, but I do enjoy taking pictures of whatever it be, landscapes. It could be a shed on a landscape and how that landscape envelops the shed. So help me out. Like, how do I tell that? Like, because when I take these photos, like, it doesn't come through the way I want it to come through,
Mm-hmm.
like that I see this beautiful picturesque landscape, and, you want to point out like maybe specific, whatever, flowers or trees or whatever. And I take the picture and it's like, yeah, it's just a landscape. So,
Well, I think the good question to ask yourself there is like, what's the focus? I guess I shouldn't use that word, but what is the main element of the scene that really grabs you and that you want to showcase, right? If it's the barn in the farm scenery, or if it's the flower in the landscape, or maybe it's the mountain that's way over there. The question then is, what can I do? Like, where can I place myself? Where can I put the camera? How can I layer these items in this photograph so that the thing I want to showcase the most is actually at the forefront of the photograph, right? That your eye goes to the first thing.
right.
And that doesn't mean it needs to be the first thing in front of the camera either, right? I said forefront, but that's not necessarily the case, right? So I feel like bringing some consciousness to what you're trying to capture is really important. If you stand somewhere and you say, oh, this is a beautiful scene, well, ask yourself, well, why is it beautiful? Saying it's beautiful is maybe not descriptive enough. If you could start to pick out the pieces and you say, well, that mountaintop has just a little bit of sun rays hitting it, and there's a little bit of snow on that mountaintop too, and that's really great because you don't see that very often, but it really describes this area. Oh, and there's also an elk in the field over there. Wow, that's really cool. So all these like stars are aligning. Okay, well, how do I capture all of that in one photograph with that one element taking over the other one, right? So I think, yeah, it's really just about being conscious of the photographs you're taking. And if you want something to stand out, let it stand out, One thing I would also highly recommend with your cell phone is, I think cell phones are amazing. I think the fact that everyone has the ability to capture photographs at any time, in their purse or pocket we're so lucky to be in a time like that.
Yep.
I used to get kind of twisted out of shape, thinking like, I'm a photographer, but all these other people are just taking photos. And that has totally changed. I think it's a beautiful thing. And so one thing I would suggest is, if you have your cell phone, which is a beautiful piece of machinery, and you want to take a photograph of something, don't just hold it up in the most convenient place, snap a photo and walk away. I would challenge you to do a bit of a photo study. So if it's your coffee, make it that simple. If it's your coffee that you just got at a coffee shop, you could just like hold your phone up, take a photo, and then call it a day. But what if you explore a bunch of different things. So you take that simple photo. Okay, you've got the basic photo out of the way, and you know it's going to work for, I don't know, your Instagram or something. Well, now start experimenting, right? What happens if you hold the camera like maybe a little bit lower? How does that change things? And how does that change the story? What happens if you hold it right above? How does that change things? What happens if you start integrating, I don't know, a donut into the background, or maybe some of the people that are in the background, or something like that, right? So just start playing. I think that's the best way to learn how to compose photographs to tell a story, is to just do lots of it. And you will eventually learn, oh yeah, when I take a photo of coffee, it's really nice to have people in the background. So I'm going to make sure that my camera position is doing that. And with a cell phone, like there's places you can stick a cell phone like that you could never even get your head into. So, so just play. Yeah, totally play. And if it's a landscape, for instance, like use your feet and go to a bunch of different angles and places, and just try a bunch of different stuff and then look at them, compare them. Which one do you like the most? Okay, well, if it's the fifth photograph you took, why? What did you change that made you love it that much more? And you'll quickly see themes. You know, if you do that for a month, you'll quickly see themes of like, oh yeah, I know for me, when I take photos of landscapes, I really like including lots of sky. Okay, now you have a photography style. So it just builds and builds from there.
That is some awesome advice. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, use your feet.
Use your feet. Well, you mentioned skills that you learned, and skills that you have from photography.
Yeah.
Well, when I was on your show for Brunch with Brent, we talked about one of those skills. And one of those skills is you have to adapt to the people and the different personalities that you run into, especially when you're taking photos of people and like weddings and whatnot. People are nervous. So they might not even be acting the same way that they would normally act. And you got to do this in a very short period of time. Like you don't have like hours and hours to get these shots. You have a certain amount of time that you can get these shots in. Like to me, that's like a partial your personality itself, but it's partial of a learned skill. So did it take you a lot of time to adjust to like that environment?
I guess I would put a question to you there is, well, what came first, the personality or the skill?
Well, obviously your personality has not changed. I mean, you are who you are.
I don't know. I would argue that. So I was a super shy person growing up, like crazy shy. And I know that might seem not quite true.
That's not true. I've listened to your podcast.
But I feel like, so there was a period in time that this became clear to me. That a change was becoming clear to me. And so I was pretty shy always growing up. You know, you've contested this, but I'm fairly introverted, while also being quite happy to interact with people. But there was a moment where it really started to connect with me that things were changing for me. And that was when I was working, you know, I was very young. I was working at this gas station as my very first job. And this was a full serve gas station in a tiny town, basically. And so I was the person pumping gas, and I was forced to talk to every single person who came up to those gas pumps. And I didn't have a choice. That was the only thing I was there to do, right? And I think that really helped me realize that, okay, well, people aren't really that scary. And also I get to see the same people over and over and over again, right? Okay, it's only like a 5-minute interaction, but over the course of, you know, a year, 2 years, I see these people repeatedly and get to know them a tiny little bit through every single one of these interactions. So I feel like that experience really helped me be less afraid of interacting with strangers, really. And what is helpful is that at the exact same time I was doing these deep dives in photography and learning from these mentors and doing these weddings and stuff like that. And so was put in positions where I was forced again to talk to people, to create images and photographs that really told stories. But what was neat was that these mentors already had this figured out. And so I could just model what they were doing as like shortcuts for getting people on side. And that just evolved and evolved and evolved to, the Brent you're looking at now, who absolutely loves interacting with strangers. And I have a toolkit in my sort of personality that allows me to, I guess, make people feel pretty comfortable with talking with me as well. And so it has felt like a nice journey of changing my personality in many ways to fit that. So it's been really fun.
Well, I would argue that your personality was always there, but it just didn't have a chance to come out. And I think we underestimate jobs that we do when we're younger that, may seem meaningless, but they give us opportunities to learn and grow. And, there are people out there who are in your position that don't exactly have that personality. Whether they may need those same skills in their job, but they just don't have them. And I think it's a credit to you that it is there in your personality already, and you may have perfected them. That
allowed them to flourish, perhaps, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you. I feel like people's where it's at. Connecting with people. So I feel like that's a skill I'm so happy to nurture on a consistent basis. There's so much richness in connecting. So thanks.
Yep.
That feels pretty meaningful.
Well, I want to get into the podcast because that's where, I came to know you. But let's start back at Jupiter Broadcasting specifically. So how did you get involved with Jupiter Broadcasting?
How did all that start?
Yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah, I had been listening to Jupiter Broadcasting for a very long time. I first discovered Jupiter Broadcasting and the Linux Action Show, if you remember that. I probably discovered it in like 2010, something like that. Around, if you will, connected to what I mentioned before, around the same time that I was thinking of switching all of my production machines to Linux. So it felt like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I better get educated.
Right.
And so then just got totally hooked. I would literally listen to the Linux Action Show with a little tiny speaker in my washroom while I was showering every single day, just going through the back catalog and stuff like that. So it became a really important part of my learning journey. And from there, it sort of just was a consistent thing for me throughout the years. But my real interactions the other direction, not just me taking it in, but my interactions with JB started when I decided to join the Mumble group, which is part of Linux Unplugged.
Mm-hmm.
So Linux Unplugged is pretty much, a community podcast, much like Biddle, right? Where anybody can show up and that's the hardest part, is showing up. So if you get to jump through a few tiny technical hurdles, then you're in, right? And so I decided, okay, well, I want to do that because I want to take my participation to a new level. And I was freaked out by what that might mean, because it meant I was then exposing myself to total strangers. And so I just showed up. I connected with Mumble. I specifically remember where I was because it was that meaningful. And kind of funny. I ended up being, I was in an off-grid cabin in Southern Ontario that didn't have any power or anything, but I just had lots of time. That was the whole idea. It's this small little hermitage that is meant for meditation and stuff like that. But I just like being in the woods and on this farmland. Is just really peaceful, really. So I bring all my technology in there, and I don't know if you're supposed to do that, but
yeah, you're not supposed to do that.
But it's the most peaceful place to work, and I do it regularly, just because it just recharges me in ways that are really nice. So it's got a wood burning stove, and it's tiny little environment, but it's just me and whatever I want to throw my mind into, right? So I thought, okay, I'm going to push myself here. This is a really great, nurturing environment to push myself. So got connected to the Mumble Room for the first time there, and literally said nothing. But that was fine. That was totally fine, because I jumped over the hurdle, at least, of being there, right? And so I thought, okay, that's not so scary. So I just kept showing up. And I think that is a big lesson for anybody is, half the work is often just showing up.
Yep.
And so just kept being there more and more and more, and still not saying anything, but listening in all the right environments. And, there was like a little bit of, as there's a little bit of sort of intro stuff and outro stuff before these episodes that never gets aired. It's just people saying hi and joking around and talking about a whole bunch of topics, right? So that felt really nice to me as a real link to the community. Is like, okay, I'm now getting to talk real time with people, especially some of the hosts I'd been listening to for years. That felt like a real treat. And so that just evolved, and I decided to go to my first Linux conference. So I decided to go to Linux Fest Northwest. Everybody at Jupiter Broadcasting had been for years saying how much of an amazing experience that was. Also because it's sort of a little bit more intimate than some of the larger conferences. And so Linux Fest Northwest is not close to me at all. I'm just north of Toronto. Linux Fest Northwest happens just south of Vancouver, just north of Seattle, so on the total West Coast. So that, that doesn't make any sense if you look at it practically.
No.
But I knew that it would lead to some good experiences if only I could show up. And so luckily I have a twin brother who lives in BC, in that neck of the woods. So I was able to sort of connect a bunch of dots to make my way there. So 2 years ago, just showed up and said hi. Brought my camera because I knew that was a way that I could stand out and a way I can give back. I could take some photographs and give back to the community a little bit and document what's happening there. So yeah, literally just showed up and said hi to Chris and Noah. Noah was there at the time, and a few other people who were there. And these were my heroes in some way, at least in the Linux environment. They had taught me for years everything that I knew. So being able to say hi was a real treat. And I would totally recommend that to anybody. If there's someone you're looking up to, just go say hi. They're often just people, they're just people like us.
Yeah.
So if you can say hi, that's usually the hardest part. So they were just so welcoming, and I was able to hang out with them for a few days. And experience the studio, which I had always seen on camera, but never actually, interacted with. So that was a treat. And just sort of said, hey, I love what you guys do. I don't know how I can help. I've taken a few photos here and maybe I can share them, but if there's anything I can do, I approached Chris and said, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. I don't know what that is, but we'll figure it out. And sure enough, that moment came up. He said, well, okay, well, I don't really know what that is now, but let's connect in like 3 or 4 weeks, because it's kind of a crazy time right now. So let's connect in a few weeks. So sure enough, in a few weeks, I said, hey, do you need some help? And I didn't know where that was going to go, right? But it was that same thing, just showing up again, right? Making that, I could have easily said like, whatever, I'm just going to let that go. But I, just quickly sent a message and said, hey. And Chris said, oh, Brent, this is perfect timing. Like, Wes is traveling. I forget where he was traveling. He was on another continent or something. He said, oh, and we really need some help. Like, would you consider co-hosting Linux Unplugged? And I thought, I should say yes to this despite my fear. And so I did. And I knew nothing, relatively, in terms of podcasting and all that stuff. But I had a friend of mine who had a mic and I could borrow that kind of stuff. And so just dove in. And Chris and I were able to co-host a few episodes of Linux Unplugged, which, I don't know, went okay, I suppose. And
Obviously,
then,
they went okay.
well, it was super fun. It was super fun to be on that side of things and to have regular interactions with Chris as well. He's such a kind, giving person. He's been a mentor of mine ever since then. And then Wes was able to join us whenever he got back from his crazy adventure, and we co-hosted the three of us for a little while, and then it was just natural for it to go back to how it was. So that just sort of progressed. I kept showing up constantly every single week for a year and a half, something like that, and so that just grew. So now it's grown to a place where I'm able to be part of the team in a really meaningful way. That team is an amazing team, and they've allowed me to do things like Brunch with Brent, which you've been a part of, where I get to basically just have conversations with people with no strings attached. I don't know how I managed to squeeze that in, but it's been super fun. And just being a part of some of the previous shows too, like the Friday stream and things like that, it's just been such a wild ride to be part of that, the Jupiter Broadcasting team. So I feel like, I feel like it's been such a treat.
It is a treat to listen to on my end.
Thank you.
I have binged, listened, however you want to put that. I have went back and listened to all the episodes.
Oh, well, thank you.
It is a treat to listen to. You have that personality where you make people feel comfortable, and it just gives that atmosphere for a great conversation, regardless of what you're talking about. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that you almost connect to the person, and you also allow the person that's listening to connect to both of you. And I think that's the awesome part about it.
Yeah, I've sort of discovered in my years that if you just give someone a platform and you actually listen to them, like there's listening and then there's actually listening, everybody has a fascinating story to tell and don't often get the opportunity to tell it, or at least to share it even. So it's been my intention to just help people tell their stories. And sometimes that's a story that both me and the guest I'm talking to make up, in the sense. I don't mean made up as in it's false. I mean make up as in we combine our minds in that moment and go down paths that neither of us could have predicted in these conversations. And that's so fun. It's super great to see that happen in a dynamic kind of way. And I think getting lost on the adventure is part of the fun.
Well, see, Linux Spotlight gets to talk to individuals. Like I get to talk to you with Linux Spotlight. But having that open forum, and I don't know how you got that, but having that open forum of just being able to talk about anything, it has less structure than Linux Spotlight, where some of the questions on here are, community questions that people want to know from people that I talk to. But your structure lends itself to that open atmosphere, and I think regardless of who you interview, like I had said to you on your show, that we can interview the same people and both interviews will be awesome because we get two different takes from the same person.
Absolutely. And I've been thinking about that a lot since you and I did our Brunch with Brent, because we touched on that topic, and I was thinking like, geez, you and I have come to such different ways of talking with people, right? If you look at the structure that you have, that's such a completely different way that I do it. I usually have like 5 notes scribbled on a piece of paper in case, and then I hardly, sometimes I never even get to them, and yet they each produce this richness that's really, I think, really valuable. You've described how you have looked at Linux Spotlight as a place where people can go to get a consistent snapshot of who people are. So, and I think that's really great. You're basically cataloging our Linux community and the origins of people and their motivations and where they are and where they're going. That's really amazing. And so there's definitely value to the way you do it. And then, I don't know, I've somehow stumbled into some value of the way I'm doing it too, or at least people tell me that. And so I'm really happy those two can coexist and are sort of complementary. So it's been fun to see that. When I first learned that I was doing something similar to you, I was in some ways afraid of stepping on your toes. I was like, oh no, there's someone here doing this already, and I don't want to piss them off or
Right.
cause any animosity of any sort, right? But it's been just the opposite with you and I. So kudos to you for helping make that.
Well, where did the name Brunch with Brent come up with? Because look, I'm telling you, people underestimate creating a name for a show, but that's your brand basically. That's the show. That's what people know it for. So where did Brunch with Brent come up with?
Well, I guess I should talk a little bit about where the whole idea for the conversation started with in the first place, perhaps. And so the idea stemmed. So we were on this ferry one time.
Oh, many stories start out like this.
So I was lucky enough to be a part of the Jupiter Broadcasting sprint that we have. We call it a sprint. We basically, a whole bunch of us were able to get in the same place at the same time, which hasn't even really happened before. So I was invited to join the crew and just hang out for a few days as a means of catalyzing a bunch of ideas and setting up, at that time we were setting up self-hosted as a show. And just going through the motions of, making stuff happen and getting the team to also everybody to meet. A lot of us had worked together for a long time, but hadn't actually necessarily met face to face. And as you know, when you meet somebody, there's just a depth of connection that
yes,
is like nothing else, right? And so we were on this ferry. I think it was I'm not going to be great because this was out of my backyard. It was in the Pacific Northwest. We were on this ferry going to what I think is Friday Island. Might have been something like that. Doesn't matter. And this was just like team exercise to go have a great experience. And but you throw a bunch of really fascinating people together, and ideas happen. So Angela and Chris, I don't know, somehow they ended up outside, and they were like, as far as the story is told, they were like, oh yeah, we need to have it would be really great to have this show where we just sort of have more open-ended conversations. And who's really good at that, Chris says, and Brent. He just like, every time you sit down with him, there's just like these great conversations that happen. So I was just like, I don't know, playing Uno or something at the time on the boat with the kids, and and they came up to me and said, Brent, sit down. We got something to talk to you about. And I was like, oh gosh. And they suggested this really great idea. And I thought, oh, wow. I feel honored that they think I can produce podcasts with them. Because at that point I had just sort of been doing some photography stuff on the fringes and participating on a community level. But that was a real honor to me for them to ask me that. And they basically said, yeah, we just want to, we have no idea what we want you to do, but just have conversations with people.
There you go.
And it was like, okay, well, we're all here to do some like crazy testing of ideas. So this is perfect. We'll just give it a shot and see where it goes. And almost immediately, jokes were going around the crew because we were all sort of assembled there. Like, yeah, we should call it like, I don't know, like Brunch with Brent. And and as you may have noticed, Jupiter Broadcasting might like alliterations, but also it had become quite clear with all of my interactions with the JB crew in person that I'm just constantly eating. And whenever I show up at the studio, I'm always making meals for everybody because I really enjoy food and making food. And it's a good way for me to make sure that some of my allergies and stuff get met, but I'm pretty inclusive. So I'll make food for everybody. And I think Chris has really come to appreciate having, sometimes it's a fruit salad with a whole bunch of stuff on top of it before he's about to record and stuff like that. So it's a bit of an inside joke, but also just really fun. And so now I don't know. I don't know if it's a good name, but it
It's a
seems to
great name.
stick.
It's a great name. You know why it's a great name? Because it again lends itself to that comfortable feel of the whole show. I mean, and I'm talking even, and again, these may be superficial things to certain people, but these are important features, like even the music itself. When that theme music comes on, you recognize it's Brunch with Brent,
Right.
and it gives that comfortable feeling to it, and the whole process from the name to the theme to the conversations is just a great experience, and I suggest people go out and listen to it if they have not.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. I will give all of the credit to the Jupiter Broadcasting team. Like, there's no way I can do any of this without them. They've been huge mentors to me, all of them. They've taught me how to even do this. I was fairly green when I first started, you know. I'd hardly used a microphone at all. There's a whole, as you know, technique to using microphones. And
Yep.
so just everything that Jupiter Broadcasting team has and continues to share with me in terms of skill sets and knowledge is invaluable. And for instance, like the theme music is a Joe Resington original, and I feel like that's a huge honor to have that there, and it just sort of fits. And we've been having a lot of fun with the Brunch with Brent stuff. And I think you probably pick up on that. Like it's not too serious. Like we're just having a lot of fun with it, and it's been just a really fun ride. So I don't know where it's headed, but I don't know.
Well,
It seems
that
to be
was my
doing good
next
things.
question.
Oh,
Like,
see,
what are the future plans, dude?
interesting. Yeah, I will say that I have no idea. And I think that's also a beautiful thing is it seems to be working. You know, people have been really enjoying some of the discussions that have been happening there. And we've been having some really cool opportunities, like the conversation I had with Jacob Rucker. Basically, he just came to me, connected with me, and said, "Hey, I got this really meaningful story that I've hardly told anybody about my life in the military, the U.S. military, and how Linux and open source and Jupiter Broadcasting community has really been impactful there." And I think the way I've been hearing Brunch with Brent and your personality and your care, I think this would finally be the place where I can tell that story. And I
Yep.
feel like if I'm able to provide some kind of platform to help people tell those kind of stories, wow, that feels incredible. And so we've been having some other people check in with us and some cool opportunities to tell other stories, which will be coming out. But it feels like it's just growing in places that we hadn't even imagined. So I think we'll just keep doing it and see where it goes.
Well, I recently talked to Chris Fisher on Linux Spotlight,
Uh-huh. I
and
hear.
and I did suggest to him that Brunch with Brent come out of the extras and get its own feed.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think it's such an important show for people
Thank
to
you.
listen to.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, for me, in many ways, it's been an honor to be a part of the extras. The extras has been like a grab-all bag for a bunch of projects that don't necessarily have a place and don't necessarily also need to have the commitment of all of the infrastructure that goes around having a show. But there's some amazing content in there, and it's been real fun to be a part of that. And so I'm happy to be wherever. If it makes it easier for people to find it somewhere else, that's great too. But the extras feed is full of gems. So happy to be one of those gems, perhaps.
So let's go back to Linux for a little while.
Oh, yeah. Linux.
You had mentioned, the software that you use. But do you have a certain workflow for, like, say, okay, you got this new machine you're going to upgrade to. What software what software do you install right away? Like, what do you need to start working?
Yeah. So I think, as you know, we all have so many tools, right? And some of them may seem pretty trivial, but they're all pretty amazing. So I will mention photography stuff maybe a little bit later. But Honestly, I would say Kate of all tools. And Kate is a text editor.
Yeah,
And I know that
it
sounds
is.
ridiculous, right? But I've basically developed like a knowledge capture system that is based on very simple principles. And that's the whole reason I really love it. It's basically just a bunch of text files in Markdown that are sitting in a bunch of folders that are synced to all my devices with Nextcloud. And so that becomes the like central repository for everything I do. And so Kate, if you haven't used Kate, it's a great piece of software. It's a KDE specific piece of software, but you can install it all over the place. But it's got these features that are just so lovely. And it's sort of a nice balance between offering features and getting out of your way when you're trying to get stuff done. Not everybody's going to like sort of the simple plain text approach to recording stuff, but me having a little bit of a developer background and being more interested in capturing knowledge than adding formatting to it. I very much enjoy when formatting gets out of my way so I could just get work done. So yeah, I didn't think I would say Kate, but I'm saying Kate because it is such a catalyst to like idea capture and creative like exploration and creating show notes for shows and also like just everything. So that is usually one of the first pieces of software that I install anywhere. And when I'm on a machine that doesn't have anything like that, I get very angry. Well, if anyone knows me, I don't get very angry, but I get slightly frustrated. That's probably more accurate. But yeah, there's a whole tool set. Like I would say that Linux itself is the tool set, right? Like it allows me to do things so simply that on other systems that I have used intimately, I find very frustrating. So Linux itself plus KDE has been an amazing combination to get me, to do amazing work. Workspaces. If anybody's not used workspaces, I can't recommend those enough. I literally have 5 of them right now. You and I are talking on number 5 because it's my like doesn't fit anywhere kind of thing. But
I get the
like,
lot.
it's sort of a compliment. But like I have one workspace for like everything I do in photography happens under that workspace. And then everything I do under the podcast happens under another workspace. And it's just a way to organize all of the tools I have in a virtual way that allows me to like you said, with hats, it's like take a hat off and move to the next hat. So those are like pretty soft tools, but man, are they helpful.
Yep.
Super helpful. So, if you want to talk specific software, probably the stuff I use on a daily basis. I'm a big Firefox fan. I'm using that all the time. Evolution for Email has been really amazing in solving some cool problems and just getting out of the way. I use Signal a lot for communication. It's been pretty amazing. Amazing tool and respects a whole bunch of stuff that I believe in. So I really like Signal. One of my absolute favorite pieces of software is KeePass, specifically KeePass XC. But
Right.
having a password manager, man, I don't know if you use one. I hope you do.
I do.
Yeah, it's like if you go from not password manager or quasi password manager like Firefox or something like that to something real, it's a game changer. And like my father has been using KeePass for 10 years and he's my father. He's pretty tech savvy, but he says too, like that's his number one favorite piece of software. And it's such a simple, like if you look at it, it's one of the simplest things that I probably use, but the power that it has over providing me with like peace of mind is immense. So
yes, I use
massive.
Bitwarden.
Yeah, I've heard that's amazing in a great many ways. Almost everybody I know is using it.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
It's not just for passwords. There's note sections, so you can put your 2-factor authentications in there and your backup codes, and
yeah, we're getting to a place where passwords are thankfully user friendly, in some kind of way.
Right.
which hasn't ever existed, or good passwords, I should say. But yeah, when it comes to photography, like I like to try to keep it pretty simple. Like I mentioned, I'm a photographer who likes to just represent real life, and so I'm not changing things too much. But of course, there's a bunch of stuff happening. There's lots of like I do stuff I do to every single photograph includes like color corrections and exposure corrections and cropping and editing specifically. And when I say editing, I mean like you have 100 photos and you end up selecting 5 out of those. That is a way of saying editing. Of course, people have used it all over the place. And so I would say number 1 is Darktable. Darktable has allowed me to do 80 to 90% of everything I need to do in my photography workflow in one application. That's extremely powerful. So if anybody who's a photographer hasn't checked it out, please do. Please do. It's so great. And I actually hope to get connected with them soon to say thanks and to maybe hopefully make a difference there. So that's a hope I'm putting out there for myself. Outside of that, I use the GIMP for all of my like things I would otherwise need to do in Photoshop. Some like compositing or masking of things or dodging and burning of certain areas. So, but I would say it's a small portion of the photographs that I produce ever go through there. It's only really specific instances. So my photography workflow actually is really simple. And I think that's actually the beauty of it. So I'm using a few other little pieces of software to kind of help those along. I would say probably K-rename is one of those. Just rename some patch of files. You can do that 100 different ways, but
right.
I'm using that every single time I bring in some photos somewhere. I'm using that. So those would be the main ones, I'd say. Pretty simple, but really powerful. And I like that combination.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great list, dude. Now, is there any software that's, not on Linux that you'd like to see come to Linux?
Oh,
especially in the photography world?
Yeah, that's a great question that I really appreciate. And I know the answer would be yes for most people. I think I'm going to say no. And I think the reason I say that is because I've been doing it for so long now, 100% on Linux, that I don't feel any gaps. And I think that's actually a sign of success, right? Is I can make a living doing photography on Linux without feeling anything's missing. I know some of the commercial products have some fancier features like AI assisted whatever. But in the kind of photography that I do, and the kind of clients that I have and the kind of work I'm very happy to be doing, I haven't needed any of that stuff. And I'm very happy to keep it that way. So, no, I haven't really run into any software that I've been like itching to come to Linux, because I feel like I'm lucky enough that the stuff I need is already there.
That is an awesome time when you're at that point. That's an awesome thing.
It feels so fun
because there was always that one piece of software that would keep you on. Well, if I wish I had this piece of software, but man, when you can get your whole workflow done, yes, there's takeaways to it. There's downside, not downsides. Downsides would be the wrong word.
Compromises.
There are things that compromises is a perfect word. See, that's why I have you here.
Yeah, I've thought of this a lot. I've thought of this lots and lots and lots. So, I think compromises is the big one, and I've made selective compromises in switching to different pieces of software, but they've all been sort of calculated, and everything I deem as essential I have. So that feels like quite an amazing thing.
So are you like this? I mean, you've already mentioned that, there are certain tools that you're okay with, but I'm talking you personally using.
Yes.
Are you this open source enthusiast that every single program has to be open source?
Hmm.
Or are you on that pragmatic side where it's okay to use proprietary software if it runs on Linux?
Now you have me auditing everything that I'm using. Um,
Well, I think it's more of a mindset than
yeah.
an actual list.
Yeah, I think the whole reason I even dedicated to being on Linux with open source photography tools is based in philosophies that I want to support. And so the open source idea is a very compelling one to me. It feels grounded in collaboration and in just including everyone in a way that's really beautiful. And so I feel like, I believe it's Gandhi who said, if you want to see a change, you got to live it. Of course, he didn't say it like that, but um, I think it's, be the change you want to see in the world. So um, I've been always trying to live up to that. And so if I really feel that open source technologies and software and ideas, because it's not always limited to software, the idea of open source and collaboration, then I've got to throw myself into it and show people that it's possible. So I would say I try as much as possible to use open source tools where appropriate. There are in many instances where the open source tools are far better than the commercial tools. Um, we see that repeatedly in Linux. And that feels like a really exciting thing. Um, but for instance, if I need to install a piece of software that's proprietary to accomplish a phone call or to learn some audio editing, we're using Reaper to do a bunch of our audio editing, and it is an amazing piece of software. And that's a new thing for me. So I'm diving in and learning that, while also trying not to get too caught up on the fact that it doesn't quite match my ideal philosophy. But I think it's important to be pragmatic and think, okay, I have this ideal, but I also need to get things done. And so where I can, where appropriate, where it makes sense, I'll definitely choose open source tools, and I'll wholly support them and recommend them to everybody I can. But I'm not opposed to also using some closed source stuff where appropriate.
Very nice. Well, look, dude, most people have a reason of why they started using Linux. Nobody comes by it by just happenstance. It could be customization, it could be flexibility, it could be your job.
Yeah.
Um, Over the years, it's not the original reason why I tried Linux, but over the years, I've come to the conclusion that the community is the best reason to run Linux. But what drives your passion for Linux?
Well, I think it's evolved actually and morphed throughout the years. I think initially it was the idea of control, that I could install software that I needed for my business and for my personal endeavors that wouldn't either disappear on me one day or decide to raise their prices to a point where I could not access them anymore, or change their business model, which we've seen a lot with the Adobe products.
Yep.
They've changed their business model, and I know a lot of photographers who don't really like it, but they're going with it. So basically, because they feel they have no choice. And so that was the main motivation to sort of dedicate 100%. Also, it makes it makes an older computer run beautifully. So that, from an economic standpoint, makes a lot of sense. I don't have to go out and purchase the latest, greatest computer to accomplish the things I need to. So that's a bit strategic. But that's also changed. So I feel really, the more I learn about the power of open source and collaboration, and start to think, okay, what is open source going to look like in 20 years if this is what's happened in the last 20 years? it feels like a way of interacting with people that we desperately need in this world. And so if I can support that in some way, bring it on. Recently, in the last 2 years, it's just like you, I've been able to connect with the community, and I didn't know that community was so giving when I was just a listener. But now I'm in a position where I am so lucky that I get to interact on a regular basis, daily. I can easily say on a daily, sometimes hourly basis with our Linux community. And it is like, it feels like it gives me superpowers or something. Like it is just brings so much positive energy to me. And I know not all of the interactions are positive. You and I have talked about this, but overwhelmingly in the JB community and a lot of the communities that I'm part of, it's just like everybody's boosting everybody back up, and that feels really good. But there are those challenges, right? Some of the communities butt heads sometimes. Some of the individuals, there's some souring happening here and there, so it's not perfect. But I would be really interested in, what you think you and I can do to help make that a little bit more perfect. How can we take those sour apples and make them into pie?
I think that's like the biggest question I've been thinking about lately is what can we do to make it better? And I don't think there's like one specific thing that we can do. I think it's just a continuation of doing the same, which is highlighting some of the awesome people that we have in this community, bridging the gap between communities to say, you don't have to be over there in that community. We're all in one community. Mm-hmm. So let's feed on that, and all of us will become a stronger community for that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, just like you, it's been an idea that's been developing, and a challenge I want to put out to myself. It's a soft challenge because it's hard to measure, but I feel like, it feels important to somehow highlight the diversity that we have. Like, somehow in my life, I've always attracted some really eccentric people as some of my best friends, and that's been a wild journey, of course, in many ways, but it's been so rich in exposing me to sort of all of the different people who can be out there in the world, and how all of those people can teach me things I never knew I needed to learn. So I feel like it's kind of the same with this Linux community. Most of it is amazing, and some of it's not always that amazing. But if we can sort of sew the threads and show each other that we're all trying to accomplish some really neat goals together, and maybe they don't always overlap, but there's definitely some similarities with all of us that are easy to find. So if somehow with some of the conversations or interactions that I can have with people, I can help bring that out and help encourage everybody to be a bit more empathetic, I think that'll be a huge success.
Yep. I obviously the community is made up of many different personalities. So you're going to have people that are never going to buy into that. They're never going to buy into the let's all just get along theory. But the majority of the community wants to. We have so much in common. How can we not join together? And we have way more in common than we don't have in common. And I think it's just something that we need to come together on.
Yeah, well said. And I don't think it's really realistic to expect us all to get along perfectly. But I think you're right. There's a lot of us that have most of what we're doing in common, right? And so we should not necessarily focus on the differences, because the similarities are overwhelming. So let's do that. Putting that out to you there, community. Let's do that instead.
Yep. Ball's in your court. Yeah. Well, you mentioned it. You mentioned Linux Fest Northwest, and one thing I didn't get into was like Linux conferences.
Right.
So, have you been to other Linux conferences, or would you say that Linux Fest Northwest is like your favorite?
Right. So I admit to, so Linux Fest Northwest was my first Linux conference experience, and it's a great one. I would recommend it to anybody. It was also my second experience. So I went a year later, which was this last April. And I actually, it's kind of a funny story. I actually missed the entire conference.
What?
Yeah. I missed the entire conference because I had a photography gig for one of my best clients in Toronto at the time on the exact dates of the conference. Which I don't know how I didn't catch that earlier. And so I committed to going anyways, which sounds crazy. So I ended up doing this wacky, like insane, multifaceted trip of like leaving my place, driving to Toronto. I don't even remember how I did. I don't know. It was crazy. And
Yeah.
made it to Toronto somehow with like lots of photography gear. Did, the great gig that I was doing in Toronto for 4 days, and then made some new friends through friends where I was able to leave most of my photography gear in a stranger's place for a few weeks, which I guess that might be taking a risk, but really good people. And like basically immediately hopped on a plane to Vancouver, and then took a sky train to a train station, took a train down took a train down to Linux Fest Northwest. So basically what ended up happening was I arrived late on the Sunday, which is, the conference goes until Sunday. So I missed the entire like official conference.
Right.
But I still consider myself to have gone because Jupiter Broadcasting and the community there, basically the party goes on. And so lots of people at the studio, which is right near Linux Fest Northwest. Lots of people at the studio on that Sunday night. And then lots of people interacting for the next several days. So I missed the conference, and yet I feel like I was at the best part of the conference for me personally. So, that was,
I totally agree with you, dude. I mean,
yeah,
the speakers and the the things that happen at the conferences are great.
Oh, they're awesome.
But the meeting of people and connecting with people personally is absolutely the best.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are pretty biased because we really like people, but and I like learning too. It's true, but if I could choose, like I would do the people first for sure. So I am not that well versed in Linux conferences, and yet am quite a big fan of them because of the positive experiences I've had there. So so those have been my only two experiences. And yet I have somehow find myself in a position where I am scheduled to go to a whole bunch of them coming up. So I'm really looking forward to figuring out how to navigate some of the bigger conferences, like the Scales and the, maybe even Texas Linux Fest. Well, I say bigger, Texas is a little bit smaller, but just the energy of different conferences. I think there's some cool stuff that happens at all of them individually. So.
Yep. And as your mentor had said, you got the bug.
I got the bug. Yeah. And in that vein, like I've been to many conferences, like in terms of photography conferences, there's a whole bunch that I've been to of all sorts. And literally like a few days ago, I just came from an Ecological Farmers of Ontario conference. And I know that may sound a little strange, but I have so many great friends, and I was changed by that conference in many ways. And as some people know, there's a lot of technology happening in farming.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them need a lot of help from people like us who can just kind of help that stuff along. So I went with a huge interest in farming, period, especially, some smaller scale, local, sometimes organic farming practices. But mixed in there is just some amazing people doing amazing things in many of the same veins as people in open source. If you look at farmers, they're some of the most creative people at tinkering that you've ever met.
That is awesome.
It's really cool.
Never looked at it like that.
And I hadn't either until I experienced it. And so I feel really lucky to be able to explore all these different interests I have, and then to just realize that they're all kind of the same.
They're all connected, dude.
Yeah, it's cool.
Do you do any coding or scripting?
I would quickly say yes, but not very deeply. And so I went to university here in Canada for 2 years doing computer science stuff. So I learned definitely some languages, some Java stuff, which I found not that useful. Sorry, Java people. But also some shell scripting, and which actually I would say is what I use the most these days, is shell scripting. That has allowed me to just understand the command line, which I would argue is a style of coding. It's one line at a time, but the command line has allowed me to do things that I never thought I could do, I think. And that skill set has grown throughout the years, and it's allowed me to do some really kind of amazing things. But it's those scripts that I write sometimes that are relatively straightforward and simple. I'm not doing anything super sophisticated, but they just make things easier and allow me to understand my computer in a different way and allow me to solve problems in a completely different way. So I would say it's easy for me to have sort of a sort of coding developer's mind. I used to very often get just lost in coding and, put some really good music on and got lost for hours solving some really interesting coding problems. So it's in there. The ability is in there. It's just malpracticed. Yeah, I, as I mentioned, I had shifted towards photography a little bit, but even within photography, I find myself using a lot of those same skills to accomplish some pretty cool things. So yeah, I don't, I in many ways wish that I was a bit more skilled there, to be able to make some differences in maybe some projects that I really love. But I would say I don't feel that I'm probably the right person to do that stuff. But that's okay.
We all have our piece, dude. We all have our
Mm-hmm.
thing we can contribute, and which, is something else that we talked about on your show, is people don't sometimes feel that they can contribute to the community in a meaningful way.
Yeah, but that's pretty false, isn't it?
It is. It is very false. We all have our own ways of contributing. You contribute in your own way through photography, through podcasting. But what do you say to those people, dude, when they say they can't contribute? Where do you send them?
Yeah. I have felt that way as well. That I felt like, I want to make a difference, but I don't know how. I've been lucky enough to fall on this podcasting stuff in a beautiful way. And I have many other people to thank for that, which I've thanked already. So, but it's a real problem, because many of us believe in this stuff and just don't know how to make a difference. But I'll say it again, like if there's a piece of software or a group of people that you feel really are meaningful to you, just show up there and raise your hand and say, hey, I don't know what you need or how I can help or anything like that, but I'm here, and maybe we can collectively find a way that I can help, maybe in the simplest of ways, like sorting bugs in a bug tracker or something like that. I know there's there's been a few conversations about this. Choose Linux did a great conversation about this a little while ago. But yeah, I would say just show up, because you never ever know what needs to be done. And you also don't know what you're capable of in making a difference. And so the best way to find that out is to go give it a shot. For those, there's going to be some people who it's a little bit more obvious, that you have some skill sets that we traditionally think are associated with some of these software projects. But the reality is, like, every software project needs some project management. Every software project needs some graphics. Every single project needs some social media stuff going on, right? Every project needs likely an accountant to keep track of, their finances in and out if they're at that point. It could be the simplest things, like, if you're not wanting to be in the daylight of communities, to be the face of a community, there's lots of stuff you can do in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say there's something for everybody. So just go say hi.
Well, I think you touched on the most important thing, and that's to show up.
Yeah.
Because that's where it all starts.
I can't underscore that enough. Seriously. Every single opportunity I've had in my life has simply been from my pushing myself to show up. The whole reason I ever got connected with any of the mentors that I have in photography is because I showed up and pushed through my own insecurities, and honestly, even just said hello is a big gesture. And even if you fumble through your hello, they will still interact with you.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't work the first time, give it a try or two. And every opportunity I've had in podcasting has come from showing up in many ways, right? And so I can't underscore that enough. If you're gonna push yourself in one way, do that in all aspects of your life.
All right, man. You are a deep thinker sometimes. So sometimes.
I can be if you give me a platform.
Okay. So let me push this idea up there and tell me what you think of when you hear that meme term, the year of the Linux desktop.
That's a really good one. And we hear it all the time, of course. And I feel like it's probably coming from a place of like deep hope or faith of some sort. And I don't mean religious faith. I mean faith that the thing we love can do beautiful things in the world. Because I know for me, I absolutely love the Linux desktop that I'm using. And I've used many of them, and I've loved them all for a variety of reasons. And so it is a catalyst for me to do some of my best work and to express myself in some of my best ways. And so I think there's a hope there in saying it's the year of the Linux desktop because, well, we just all want it to, we want the gifts that we've received from it to be shared widely. I think that's really where it comes down to. Do I think it will ever be the year of the Linux desktop? No, because we don't even know how to measure that. What is, nobody's defined what that actually entails, right?
Right. What does that even look like?
Yeah, so it's a silly thing to chase or try to suggest that it has happened or not. But I think it for everybody just comes down to like having a deep hope that it changes some people's lives and gets shared widely and is able to keep doing beautiful things. I don't think any of us would want to see it go away. And thankfully, because of the, ways that it has come to us through open source means, it's not ever going to go away. But we also, for me personally, I just want to share it with as many people as I possibly can because I know it's done beautiful things for me. And so, I that doesn't really answer your question because I don't think your question is answerable. The year of the Linux desktop, but as far as what it means to me, that's kind of what it means. Is like every year we should be trying to spread it out, and we may not be able to measure the impact, but it's there.
Well, I think it's different for everybody, and like I said to you, everybody has a different answer for that. So
yeah, and you're starting to collect all these different answers.
It's great,
see threads throughout all of them. That's a cool place to be in.
Well, Brent, if you could change one thing about Linux, what would it be?
Oh man, that's great. So I will argue that no. I will be transparent and I'll say I'm going to buy myself time by saying that I'm not typically that great at these style of questions because I don't think it's actually my place to say, to be prescriptive. Although, I think I'll lean on my previous answer, which was I hope as many people as possible can get exposed to Linux somehow. And I know that's a challenge. That's the thing I would want to change, is to convince those who haven't tried it before that it's not a scary thing. Some people may have answered this question with something specific that maybe is technical or something like that. But, there's some really cool things happening on Linux. Like, you can run it on almost every device. Alex was just showing me that his vacuum is running Linux, and he's able to like shell into his vacuum and
What?
update it. Oh yeah, it's insane. I'm sure it might be part of some show at some point because it's really fabulous. But it just made me realize that like, oh wait a second, like Linux is all over. It's surrounding us. But for me, the real challenge is like, I just want to help people. And so if I can help people who've never been exposed to Linux somehow see Linux as a positive thing that they could undertake, that's what I would want to change.
Well, you mentioned the reasons that you had started in Linux, and you also mentioned that those reasons are evolving. So I always ask people, are those the same reasons, or do those reasons still apply today for you choosing Linux? So do those reasons still apply today?
Oh yeah, I would say they still apply, and they've evolved, and they've solidified, and that new reasons are coming all the time. Like those original, even the most earliest experiences were simply about tinkering and having fun and learning. And that is still happening on a daily basis. So I think that's a beautiful thing. It's just kind of par for the course, right? And it's simply because I go out seeking those things. I can't help myself but want to learn things, and so Linux has been a very friendly way for me to dive into those kind of things. So that's some of the earliest stuff, and that's still here. Some of the later reasons with like switching my whole photography business to Linux, those reasons have just proven themselves as extremely valuable. I have been able to use open source software throughout successfully and been very happy with it. And when I go back using some software that's more commercially available, I don't get those same like fuzzy feelings inside of the fact that I'm using something that people all over the world have collaborated on. So those reasons still feel really meaningful. Some of the philosophy behind open source and Linux, when it comes to making it available to anybody to change, making it available at any time, you can download old versions of software if you're trying to do something kind of strange or esoteric. So that kind of like open to anybody and open to everybody approach feels more and more important the more we're seeing sort of the landscape of our digital ecosystems go in the completely opposite direction. So I can't help but support that more and more all the time. And just some of the cool technology that's happening on Linux, like we're at the forefront of some really cool stuff. So yep. I feel like I got all those original reasons that are being reinforced and enforcing each other. And then I'm being exposed to all these other reasons. Community, there's community, there's my way of giving back. There's some cool technologies that are happening only on Linux these days. Like AI stuff is pretty Linux heavy and those kind of things. So I feel like I'm just collecting more and more and more and more ideas and reasons to support this kind of stuff. So no, it's growing, and they're still all there, and they're as strong as ever.
That is awesome. All right. Is there anything else you want to share with people, dude?
I suppose I would want to just encourage people to say hi. I don't know if there's anything really that I would necessarily want to point people towards, but I think, yeah, come say hi if it's in person, if it's on Twitter, if it's in Telegram, on some of the, the JB groups and stuff like that, or some of the other, just say hi and let's start a conversation and see where it goes.
Well, you mentioned Telegram and Twitter. Is that your preferred method of people contacting you?
I'd say a really good way to get connected with me is on Twitter. It's a place where it's a really nice place for me to collect all of the people doing stuff in Linux. And so I would say if you hit me up on Twitter, that's a pretty fast place to reach me. Of course, sometimes I'm underground taking photos or in a plane somewhere, flying somewhere, so I won't always respond right away, but I will at some point. So I'd say Twitter is a great place. And if you connect with some of the Jupiter Broadcasting Telegram groups, they're pretty active now, and you'll find me in there every once in a while. So those are two good places to find me.
Awesome. Dude, I want to take a moment to thank you for what you're doing in Brunch with Brent, because it means so much to the community that you present it in a positive way that forwards the community itself. So it's for the community and it's by the community, and I think it's awesome. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
Wow, thank you. I take that in quite closely to my heart. So thanks for wholeheartedly supporting that. It's huge to hear that from you. So thank you.
Well, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, it's been a blast. I was really looking forward to this. So thanks so much for having me.
This was definitely a fun episode. Thank you very much.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to have shared a little bit of it with you. Yeah, it's great to share time with you. So thanks.
All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux.
Ready when you are.
Ready when you are. All right. So when I do the intro, I will do the intro, and then there'll be a short pause for introduce you.
Okay.
For me as a cut. So.
It's like you've done this before.
Maybe.
A few times.
The star of the show is in line. Love it.
This is Cosmo.
He knows what's going on. Cosmo. Can you hear me, Cosmo? Cosmo, it's your big day. Cosmo. Look at the camera, for crying out loud. There you go. You are magnifique. I'm talking to Cosmo, but he's not listening.
Yeah, well, he's a egotistical podcaster, He won't talk to just anybody. So, Cosmo, if you would just, escape the scene, exit scene left.
And I mean, I'm sorry there's no brunch, dude.